this morning. Anyway, this week that was his excuse. He couldn't leave me behind, and then we got this summer, and so I told him that he had no more excuses. So anyway, he obliged, and then after I asked him and I got to thinking about it, I was very concerned that when I got back, we wouldn't be at church. But anyway, I see y'all are back, so that's wonderful. Hank must have done a pretty good job, so that's great. But he's a good old guy and love him to death. But the reason I was not here last week is I was in Colorado helping Adam and Brandy, or mainly Adam, bring some cows down out of the mountain and sort and all kind of stuff. And it was a blast, and it was beautiful. And I took pictures, but my wife tells me I didn't take enough. Apparently 30 is not enough for a week. I figured, it's 4 or 5 a day. That's good, right? And she took 300 in 2 days, so I don't really know how that works. Anyway, it was gorgeous and it was lots of fun. But there was this, as we were driving the cows down out of the mountain into the pen, and there was this one calf, and it was a cute little black baldy. So it was a black calf with a bald face. I mean, the bald come all the way down his jaw. Like, it was like his whole head was white. Most of the time they'll just have white on their face or something like that. But his whole head was white. Like, you couldn't miss this sucker. Anyway, it was a cute little calf. He probably weighed 350 or 400, which was actually really small for this herd. This herd, most of the calves were between 550 and 750. So they had some pretty big calves. And so this was like a runt, right? And when we were driving everything down the mountain, they were in probably, I don't know, 200 or 300 acre trap. And we had to get them from there down a little bitty road. So like we drove them out on the road and then down the road, like, I don't know, a couple hundred yards, and then into a pen, and it was a corral. It was interesting. But it was about halfway down the mountain, and this little calf starts kind of lagging behind. Everybody else is kind of moving along. All the calves and cows are moving along, and they're not necessarily with their mamas, but they're kind of all moving together and kind of all bunching up down at the end where they kind of bottleneck onto the road. But this little calf stayed behind, and just, it was cute. It didn't look nasty. It didn't look like anything was wrong with it. It looked healthy. It wasn't skinny. It wasn't, it just was small. And it was really slow. It just kept moving slower and slower and slower. And finally, Adam was behind it, kind of trying to push it. And then I was on the other end of the pasture gathering and pushing them around. And I looked over and I see the calf behind Adam. And Adam's done gone up and pushing cows. And we got everything up, and he said, that cow's got brisket. I was like, no, brisket is something you eat. He said, no, it has what they call brisket up here. And the issue was that it was a heart problem that this calf had. And it had to do with altitude. And the further that you go up the mountain, for some reason it feels like it gets relief. I don't really understand that, but the higher they go, the worse it is for them. So what happens is this calf had fluid around his heart. And the higher in the elevation it went, the more fluid it got. And so the more it made his heart hurt. So he didn't want to suck. He didn't want to eat. He just stood there. And there's a couple of things that you can do to fix this. However, this calf was pretty far gone at this point. But you give them, he called it Lasix, and you restrict their water, and you bring them down like to a lower elevation. I mean, we were like 10,000 feet. So, I mean, it's pretty good ways up there. And those are the three, a couple of things you can do to help, save the calf. Of course, you want to figure out what the mama is and what the bull was so you can get them out, because whether or not it's genetic on the paternal side or the maternal side, I don't know. But anyway, I think I'd be looking to figure out which bull and which heifer or which cow had that one so she could go. But anyway, this calf, even though it looked good on the outside, had issue on the inside. And the problem was, it was a heart problem. It was a heart problem. And there was nothing that any of us could do, and we couldn't necessarily see, because the calf looked fairly normal. It was just small. Wasn't even breathing hard. I guess because it didn't have anything to do with the lungs. It was all about the heart. And so I got to thinking about things that we could learn as Christians from this particular calf. And so I got 4 things that we're going to talk about today about this calf, about brisket. And I called this sermon the heart problem, because it's what it is. It's a heart problem. But number 1 is, sometimes things are worse on the inside than they appear on the outside, right? The outside of this calf looked normal, other than it was small. But it was the inside, the heart, that was having trouble. The second thing I saw was that none of the cows would claim the sucker. The cow that had this calf wouldn't even go over to it. And that was a couple of times we thought we was going to get it to pair up so we could figure out what cow it was, write the number down, and when we sorted them, we'd take her off. But none of the cows would accept it. None of them would claim it. They didn't want nothing to do with it. None of them did. It stayed off by itself, stood by itself, laid down, stood up, but didn't move a whole bunch. So none of the cows would claim it. And I also realized that whenever you're pushing cows like this, you have this calf, sometimes the best thing that you can do for this calf is to leave it and pin everything else. Because if you don't leave it, if you try to pin it, go ahead and pin it with everything else and try to push it, you're going to cause more problems for that calf. And so sometimes it's better to leave the calf and pin everything else, work everything else, than it is to push the calf. And the 4th thing is, it's a heart problem. There's nothing else wrong with this calf. He had no disease. He had no virus. There was no bacteria in him. But the fluid around his heart was a problem. It was a heart problem. If you want to flip over to Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 and 16, is where we're going to start out, and we'll move along from there. But this calf, he was a cute sucker too. I believe I took him home. A couple of days later, we stayed up on the mountain a couple of days, just me and Adam, and we're checking. We had a couple of cows get out, and so we had to make sure that everything was staying in and they didn't tear up 200 yards of fence, because we weaned all their calves at one time. And so you have 287 mad mamas. Sometimes it's good to have good fence. And they didn't have really good fence, so we stayed out there and made sure that they didn't tear down all of it that was there. But anyway, we were out there a couple of more days, and I think on day 2, the calf did die. It was alive that morning, standing up, and looked like it did the last couple of days we were there. But in that afternoon when we came back, it was dead, so we had to drag it off. So it was pretty far gone by the time we found it. So I'm not sure if we'd have caught it, put it in the trailer, and shipped it down to a lower elevation, if it would have lasted or not. I'm not sure. But that's the rest of the story. Back to what we were talking about, Matthew chapter 7, if you're there. Matthew chapter 7, verse 15 through 16. It says, "Beware of false prophets who come disguised as harmless sheep, but are really vicious wolves. You can identify them by their fruit, that is, by the way they act. Can you pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles?" So, by looking at this calf out in the pasture, if you'd have just seen this calf out in the pasture, would you have thought, man, that thing's got a heart condition? Would you have said, something's wrong with that calf, if you just passed by and looked at it? Probably not. I mean, maybe a very experienced cattleman, somebody that's around it all day, may have said, you know what? Thing looks a little puny. Maybe something's wrong. Maybe we need to check it out. But for the most part, we'll just pass on by. Oh, everything looks great. Kind of look over everything. But when you start putting them under stress is when you figure it out, right? People may appear like everything's okay. And how many of us do that? We want to make sure that everybody sees that we're fine. We want anybody to see us weak and vulnerable. We want everybody to know that we got this. We got everything under control. We don't need any help. We can handle it. We do it all the time. But on the inside, we're tore up. On the inside, we're about to come unglued. And so, when we finally have had enough, we lash out. We lash out at other people. We lash out at our family. We scream and holler. Maybe go on a rampage, throwing stuff, or I don't know, screaming and hollering at motors going down the road that aren't going fast enough for you. I keep using that because I know all about it. But they don't know any better. They may not know any better, which is why they're lashing out. But it's because they don't know Jesus. And if they do know Jesus, it's one of those things that they have a problem with, and they're not seeking Him daily. When you start seeking Him daily, and you know Him, then those things become easier to deal with. There's less lashing out. There's less frustration. There's less torment inside, because you know where to get your peace. You know where to find comfort, and it's in Jesus. We can't do it on our own. We also can't waste time with people that are going to lead us the wrong way. How many people have ever seen one of those preachers on TV that are on Sunday morning? And you watch it, and it makes you feel good. And then you realize that they didn't say one thing out of the Bible. Those people make you feel good, but they're not going to tell you the truth that is in the Word, because that might make you feel bad, because it's a standard that we can't live up to. And so we can't listen to false prophets. We can't listen to people that are going to lead us down the wrong road, because that's going to bring us somewhere we don't need to be. We need to be seeking Jesus. We need to be seeking what's right. We need to be not having a heart problem, and not having a heart problem means that we're seeking Jesus. We have Him in our heart. We have Him filling that gap that we can't fill with anything else. And so we need to leave those people alone. And we need to focus on the one true God. And that is a relationship through Jesus Christ. Get Matthew chapter 10. If you'll flip over a couple of chapters to Matthew chapter 10, verse 14. We'll try to wrap this up, but in Matthew chapter 10, verse 14, it says, "If any household or town refuses to welcome you or listen to your message, shake its dust from your feet as you leave." Now this was Jesus talking to His disciples when He sent them out the first time. And He told them to go out and spread the gospel about Him. And He knew that there were going to be people that were not going to listen. And they weren't going to listen because they had a heart problem. And so he told them, tell them the word, preach the truth, and if they don't want to hear it, move on. Shake the dust from your feet. It means wash your hands of them. Be done with them. Go on to the next town. Go on to the next family. So sometimes it's better for us to leave the one behind that doesn't want to hear it and move on to the rest. Now, because let me tell you, we are not responsible for other people and their pursuit of Jesus Christ. Everyone has their own, are responsible for themselves. Wives, you're not responsible for your husband. Husbands, you're not responsible for your wives. You're not responsible for your children in going to heaven. We are responsible for telling them and teaching them about Jesus. We are responsible for that. And so, whether or not people want to hear it, we need to preach it. And then let God grow them. Let God do the work, because we can't do the work. We can't save them, but we can plant the seed. We can teach them, we can preach to them, we can do everything that we can do, but in the end of the day, we cannot save them. Only God can do that through Jesus Christ. And so sometimes it's better for us to leave the one and take care of the rest. The ones that need it, the ones that want to hear it, sometimes it's better for us to do that. It's not, a lot of people say, well, we need to be persistent. That is true. There's lots of people that pray lots of years for one person to get saved, and they do towards the end of their life. And I've heard story and story and story about it. But it's not our responsibility. And it could be God has us to move on to something else. Not that we can't pray for them. Not that we don't need to pray for them and pray for them every day. But sometimes it's God moving us on to someone else that needs to hear it and wants to hear it. Sometimes that's a hard differentiation, or is that a word, differentiation, to make. But it's when it's at that time that you need to be praying about, okay, God, do I need to stay on this person? Do I need to continue on this current path with this person or this group? Or do I need to move on? And let Him make the decision, because it's up to Him and not up to us. We need to be seeking His will for our life, not our will for our life. And so we need to be concerned about a heart problem. We need to be concerned about other people's heart problem that we can't see. You may have a heart problem. That's something to be concerned about as well. We need to leave the false teachers alone. We need to leave the ones that are going to lead us down the wrong way alone. And we need to seek good counsel through people that are preaching the truth, not people that just make you feel good. And sometimes we need to let go of one to save the many. Because that one doesn't want to hear it. Because that one has no need, has no want for it. It's a heart problem. And we need to be able to see it. We need to be able to deal with it. And the heart problem is not knowing Jesus Christ. And this morning, if you don't know Jesus Christ, if you haven't ever made a personal decision to follow him. Let me tell you about it real fast. God loved us so much that he sent his son to come and die on a cross so that we could be made right with him, because we are sinners by birth. You don't have to teach kids how to be bad. They're that way already. We are sinners by birth, and so he sent his son to die on a cross to set us free from that sin so that we can be righteous in front of him. And what we have to do is have faith in him and believe that he came and died for us to take away our sins, and we have to confess our sins to him. And then it gets hard. Living up to the standard, following him, seeking him in everything. But that's how you start. Let's pray. If you're here this morning and you've never made a decision to follow Christ on your own, on purpose, then you can do that right now. You say this prayer after me. This is a sinner's prayer. You can say it out loud, or you can say it to yourself. You don't have to come up here. Say it just like this. Dear Lord, I'm a sinner. I mess up daily. I need you in my life. I need you to take control of my life. I'm ready to hand you the reins to my life. God, I thank you for sending your son to die on the cross to set me free from sin so that I can be righteous in front of you. Lord God, I thank you for the day.